Welcome to the Red and Bold Show. We are excited to have you here joining us. I am one of your hosts, Marc Adams of 49ers Camelot, and I'm joined by Anthony Robertson of 49ers Cutback. Ant, what's up, my man?
Just enjoying the off season as much as possible. It always gets interesting when there's news that comes out with OTAs because OTAs are not supposed to be very significant. But when things like what happened today happen, it makes OTAs interesting. And I think we're getting closer. We're having this build towards mandatory minicamp. And I think that we'll learn a lot about that. And then eventually it's that break. And everyone doesn't like that break. No one likes the big span between. In fact, the players union doesn't like it either. They're trying to change the offseason program. So OTAs don't exist in the future. So it's pretty interesting, but yeah, I'm ready for the season. I've already been watching highlights. I'm ready for NFL football. I'm tired of the offseason already.
Yeah, I'm with you. I get kind of tired of just talking over the same stuff. And when you have a season, you have a game to preview and then a game to review and things to break down, and that's a lot more fun than just talking about where's Jauan Jennings and will Brandon Ayuk sign his extension soon? Will they come to an agreement? All of those things that we're going to get into today. So thanks for everybody who's joined us, and thanks for those that are already in the chat jumping in here. Great to have y'all, and hope that you enjoy the show today. So let's get in. This is week 2 of the 49ers OTAs, the organized team activities. I mean, we haven't seen much today, but just in what we've seen from last week and then just little bits of what we've seen today, what's jumped out to you that you really like or you really don't like? Anything kind of get your attention?
I think that just the process of has been revealing. The coaches have been very clear on what the process is for young players, and I'm hoping that that's going to sink into the fan base as they realize that some of the reports that are coming out about OTAs about how the players are practicing, or maybe that they don't look as fast as they're supposed to look, is part of the plan. Of course, you're not going to look as fast. You're also not expected to go full speed right now because you're trying to acclimate to football. They have phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, as they go through the offseason. And I think that was really cool to hear the coaches talk about the fact that, yeah, players like Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, they're not going to look as good or as fast right now. They're trying to figure out the concepts. They're trying to figure out the formations, where they're supposed to line up. And that's more important right now as they're going through install to learn. And then eventually we'll get to speed, because then they don't have to think. They could just go out, operate on the field. And so it's nice to hear that. I hope a lot of fans hear that as well, so that way they can get an understanding of the process of football and how exactly the offseason is so important for players, both veterans and rookies, but especially rookies or players joining this football team, to learn the ins and outs and get accustomed to everyday drills that the 49ers run and just the way that they go about doing their business. So I like that from the coaching staff, and I've heard positive reports about multiple players, which always makes you feel good that players are coming in and acclimating to what Kyle Shanahan plans to do with this football team.
Who are some of the ones that you've heard positive things about?
I've heard some positive things about Ricky Pearsall and then Danny Gray as well, but Ricky Pearsall especially. Some of the things that, I've heard about him are smooth, and you always like to hear smooth, and you like to hear a guy that can get in and out of their breaks really good. In and out of their cuts is very important. So those things are promising for a young player. Yeah, right now, just being smooth in what you do is great. That means what you saw on film is translating to what they're seeing in front of their eyes. And then there were really good things about Daniel Bullock, or that Daniel Bullock said about Renardo Green. I mean, he said he moves like water. The fact that he's that fluid in the way that he's changing direction and flipping his hips and running with receivers, that's a lot of praise, because that's something that you don't get from a lot of cornerbacks. They have some sort of hitch in their giddy up. They're never that fluid. So you like fluid hips, but it's hard to find. And you got a guy that can move like that, which means he can change direction and get on top of guys. So I thought that for our top 2 picks, those are some very positive comments coming out from not just media members, but coaches as well.
Yeah, that's great things to hear. I was going to talk about Danny Gray because I had heard different reports on him. I had heard that he's caught everything that's been thrown his way in OTAs. I also had heard from others that he was still dropping passes. But you said that you've heard good things about him. What did you heard? What have you heard? And do you think that the positive things that you've heard, does that bode well for him making the team?
Yeah, I've heard that he's been catching the football. And what his coach, Leonard Hickerson, said was he's been consistent. Ever since he showed up on April 15th, he's been consistent. And that's ultimately what you're looking for a young player that we haven't really got to see play in games very much. He had no opportunities last year. He suffered the injury early on in the preseason. And so no one got to really see what Danny Gray was doing in training camp besides those of us who were actually able to go. And even then there was conflicting reports. Now, I was very optimistic about Danny Gray and how he looked at training camp because I thought it was night and day from his rookie season, a rookie season that was definitely somebody that was struggling with the formations and with the concepts, where when you got to year two, he wasn't. He knew everywhere to be, and he was doing it the way he was supposed to do it. And then he was making key catches. He was running after the catch. He looked like a formidable wide receiver option for the 49ers. So when I hear the reports about him being consistent and him catching the football, it just makes me think he's building upon what I saw last year at training camp. And I think that does bode well for him because there's still an opportunity for him to make this team because he runs a 4.3 40. When you have speed like that, then you're always going to be an option for a football team somewhere. John Ross just got signed to play again after being retired because he's really fast. Fast people get people's attention. So I think Gray has that added element that only now Jacob Cowing really has on this football team. So I think he's an interesting player, and I think he's still got a shot, but he's got to be consistent. Consistency is the key to being a good football player.
Speaking of Jacob Cowing, Josh asked, why wasn't Jacob Cowing at week 1 OTAs? So that was the report that he wasn't there. But then I read a report from somebody that I can't recall. I wrote it in one of my articles, but I can't recall who it was, who said that they actually saw him on the sideline in street clothes just watching. Now, Nick Wagner posted just probably 30 minutes ago, 49ers I did not see at Wednesday's voluntary session. Charvarius Ward, Brandon Ayuk, Chris Conley, Christian McCaffrey, Talanoa Hufanga, Feliciano, Greenlaw, Hubbard, Brendel, Trent Williams, Camelot, Drake Jackson, Malik Collins. He did not list Jacob Cowing. So I would assume, based off of what Nick Wagner wrote, that Cowing is there. I haven't watched any videos to see if he was with the wide receivers in drills or anything like that. Have you heard anything about why he wasn't there? Did he get hurt in the rookie minicamp or anything like that?
I did not hear why he missed. I did hear that he missed. In the interviews, Leonard Hickerson said he missed, Chris Conley missed because they were talking about getting reps for other players like Pearsall. But I do know that Cowing practiced today because David Lombardi had tweeted, I think it was like 20 minutes ago, that he had a nice catch on a post pattern. So he's out there and practicing. He did rookie minicamp. So my guess is maybe he had some tightness or something that they were being careful with, because when you're coming in and you're going through different drills that you're not accustomed to going through, sometimes your body responds. So that would be my guess, but it would just be a guess. I have not heard anything concrete about Jacob Cowing and why he wasn't participating when media members were there and Cowing was supposed to be practicing last week.
Yeah, it's just concerning when you have a rookie that's missing times like this, especially with Brandon Ayuk missing week 1 and now week 2 with Jauan Jennings missing last week. That's prime opportunity for Jacob Cowing. So some of these other guys, I mean, Chris Conley, he's a vet. McCaffrey, we'll talk about him in a minute. Hufanga recovering from injury. Feliciano, that's kind of surprising that he's not there. Greenlaw recovering from injury. Chris Hubbard, this is a bubble guy that may not make the team. And so far he's been missing in action. So not really sure why a guy like that would miss. I feel like if I made an NFL team, like if I was at OTAs and I'm a bubble player, I'm going to do everything I can to be there. Jake Brendel's injured. Trent Williams, he's not going to show up for a while. But then you look at Camelot too. I mean, is he still recovering from injury? Same thing with Drake Jackson. Are those two recovering from injury still? Because those two need to be there.
Yeah, that's the report, that both of them are still in the recovery process. The Cameron Latu one very much surprised me because there were those conflicting reports during the season that if they wouldn't have put him on IR to end his season before the 53-man roster was officially constructed, that he could have come back. But now it looks like he had no chance of coming back during the year. And in fact, this injury was more significant than initially thought. So at some point, Cameron Latu is going to come back. At some point, Drake Jackson is. Latu is a guy that could use as many reps as possible. So right now, he's got to be unhealthy to not be there. There's no other reason beyond that. And that's, I think, why Kyle Shanahan said, hey, he can't be tight end 2 if I haven't even seen him practice. He's alluding to the fact he's not healthy. And he's running into a dangerous game here where at some point they're going to have to make a decision on him. And every single player that gets to this situation with injuries and not being on the field, Kyle Shanahan will officially say at some point, he better be on the field or, so-and-so is going to happen. It happened to Jalen Hurd. It happened to others. Hopefully Cameron Latu is available for mandatory minicamp. That would be great. If not, at least by day 1 of training camp, he's got to be out there so that way he can practice and show everyone that last year, I was a little underwater. I was struggling with some of the things that were happening, but this year I'm a different tight end and I'm going to make an impact on this team.
Yeah, he's already behind Braden Willis, and there's a 6'6" undrafted free agent rookie tight end that a lot of people are pretty excited about in Mason Pline. Now, he's a project. He's new to football. He hasn't been playing very long. And so I don't expect him to come in and just automatically make the team. But it sounds like this guy has a lot of talent, a lot of physical skill that could end up being something like an intriguing piece for the 49ers to work with.
Yeah, you got a transition guy coming from playing basketball. So, he's got some athleticism. You got 6'6", you got a huge wingspan. Seems to be a red zone threat from the film that I watched. There's going to be a lot of development that has to go on with Mason Pline. I don't think he's a guy that's going to make an impact on the team for sure in 2024. I think he would be more of a developmental piece. I know I've heard conflicting reports from he doesn't look very good to all the way that he's going to be tight end 2 when the season starts. It's always interesting when you get those reports in OTA, but I think that Mason Pline is going to be someone to watch. Let's see how he progresses. In learning, one of the things that you have to do in Kyle Shanahan's system is be able to block as an inline blocker. And I think that's going to be a key. If he handles that, then, you've got the potential of a young guy with significant size and athleticism that can help your football team.
David Campbell said, you just reminded me that I had a dream last night of Pline catching a touchdown pass. So let's hope that that's in the Super Bowl, like final drive of the Super Bowl. He wins the game winner. That would be cool. Also noticed from Nick Wagner that Malik Collins is not at OTAs. He wasn't there last week either. Is he dealing with an injury as well, or would there be another reason that maybe he's not there?
Yeah, the report was last week that he did not come because he's getting family things in order. His kids were graduating, and then he was going to make the move out here. So that's some of the veterans especially that are joining the team, are taking the opportunity to get their families settled or take care of last second things before they come out here. Most of them will be here for mandatory minicamp, but he had his kids graduating this week.
All right, and then so that's obviously a positive thing. So let's get to the big news today. Bebop Jones asking, did we sign Jauan Jennings, or did I just hear a rumor today? 2 years, $15 million. It is not a rumor. Jauan Jennings has signed a 2-year extension with the 49ers. The 49ers, interestingly, what I saw was that they reported that it was a 1-year deal, but I guess it's a 2-year deal. So are you excited to have Jauan Jennings back? Here's a player with 19 catches in the regular season, 265 yards or something like that, 1 touchdown in the regular season. Very replaceable numbers, but that doesn't count what he does in the run game as a blocker. It also doesn't count what he did in the postseason. He had almost as many catches in the postseason as he had in the regular season. And we all know that if the 49ers hold on to win that Super Bowl, Jauan Jennings may have been your Super Bowl MVP. Are you excited to have him back?
Oh, yeah. I'm always excited to have Jauan Jennings because I like the dog mentality. He brings a certain mentality, not just to the wide receiver room, but to the 49ers offense. Whenever you have a guy that plays wide receiver, but can wham block interior defensive linemen, you got someone special. That's normally a job for fullbacks and physical tight ends. And here's a wide receiver that can do it. I think what they did as well was ensure, in case something doesn't work out with Brandon Ayuk, or in case something doesn't work out with Deebo Samuel in the coming years, that you are able to keep Jauan Jennings. They wanted to get this done with Kendrick Bourne way back when he was a restricted free agent, but they couldn't work out that deal where they add a year on to their contract that they've already been offered, their restricted free agent contract. They did it with Colt McKivitz last year. Now they've done it with Jauan Jennings. They like doing this, an extra year added to that already restricted free agent tender. So let's see what the money ultimately looks like. Before I seen Josh is saying, he thinks they overpaid him. I want to see what they did as far as signing bonus, what they did as far as potential void years to spread that out. That could be interesting, but the way that the league is going and the value of a wide receiver is going way up. And even getting a third wide receiver like this is important. It does bring up questions about Pearsall, but I'm a huge fan of Jauan Jennings. I love the fact he's going to be at the 49ers for 2 seasons. And I think that ensures that we're going to have a guy that can make big-time catches, and when the moment is needed, he's going to make a big-time play.
Yeah, I love having Jauan Jennings back. I don't know what happened in the regular season. I mean, he's never been a big numbers guy. But you go back to 2021 when the 49ers played the Rams in the last game of the season, a game they had to win in order to get into the playoffs. And Jennings made multiple huge catches in that game. And that's kind of where he started taking on this third and Jauan mindset. It seemed like a big year for him in 2021, kind of his breakout year, solid season in 2022. And then last year, kind of down for the regular season. But man, like we talked about before, once the postseason came, he was that guy that we're used to seeing. So that was pretty exciting. And like you mentioned, we expected Brandon Ayuk to not be at OTAs. So when Jennings wasn't there either, it was a little concerning, what's going on with this. But the 49ers doing what they don't do with their star players, which is sign them before training camp. Not sure why those other guys, they can't get the deal done until like that last hour. With Bosa, it was almost literally the last hour before the Pittsburgh game, just days before that game. So who knows what they're doing, but I still think they're going to get Ayuk worked out either before training camp, like the night before, or within those first couple of days.
Yeah, I think it's important to get Ayuk done, at least by the end of the first week. I think that first week you often see the players are adjusting. I think they would love to have him in before that, but I think after the first week would make sure Ayuk is there when you get into pads. That was kind of when Deebo got in. I think that's very important. But you got to sign some of these guys like Jauan, knowing that they're into your future plans. Now you know what kind of money you have for Brandon Ayuk, and all the while that Brock Purdy's contract's eventually going to come up. So 2 years, $15 million for Jauan Jennings, $10 million guaranteed. It's a nice pay raise for Jauan. And I think that they reward him for the good play and the plays that he's made. Like you talked about that Rams game where he comes up big in big moments, and they ensure that Kyle Shanahan can be able to run the offense that he wants to run. And if they want to run more 11 personnel this season than they've ever run before, they can do it because Jauan can make all those blocks you need him to make.
Yeah, and it's also a big thing to have Jauan Jennings, who's the best blocking wide receiver in the NFL, and Brandon Ayuk, hopefully coming back at some point this summer, who's probably the second best blocking wide receiver. That can't be overstated or underlooked. I mean, that's a big thing, especially with this running game and how Kyle Shanahan wants to run the ball. Having two wide receivers that block that well makes this running game really dangerous.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we don't know how matchups are going to work this season, but one thing we do know is you got to be equipped to handle multiple different looks. And some of the reason the 49ers might be looking to go and make sure Jauan is available is 11 personnel could be something they have to do from time to time to take advantage of weaknesses of defenses, because defenses are somewhat going to bigger nickels. And so if you can find ways to run the ball and that way pull, you check off the field occasionally, you could go that way. So you just have to be prepared to be able to handle whatever defense you're looking at. And I think Jauan is one of those guys that has a willingness and an ability to be able to be used in a couple of different areas to really help you in the run game, but also in the passing game. That third option is huge when it comes to the wide receiver room, and he does a really good job.
Yeah, as long as Kyle Shanahan doesn't use him on a Deebo Samuel play like he did coming out of the half against Green Bay in the playoffs, that you remember that end around or whatever it was, that did not work.
No, that was when for Deebo, that was bad.
Yeah, Deebo was out for some reason. I think he was hurt or something like that. And Kyle called the play and didn't notice. I guess he didn't notice that Jennings was in for Deebo, and that was a loss. All right, let's get on to something not as positive. Where is Christian McCaffrey? Is he holding out? Is this a contractual thing? I've heard some people say, well, he's getting married, but that's like over a month away, I think. Is this something we should be concerned about, or is it like, nah, he'll be fine? I mean, he's going to show up at training camp and he'll be good to go. Nothing to worry about.
I don't think it's anything really to worry about. I don't really consider missing OTAs holdout. And the reason is it's voluntary. And you normally see a lot of veterans that don't show up to these OTAs because they are voluntary. You don't have to show up. Would the team love it for them to show up? Yes. And I think there was an expectation that McCaffrey was going to show up from fans because he showed up all of last year.
Right.
But my thought process has been on the whole Christian McCaffrey not showing up, that the reason he showed up last year and went through every single process of offseason workouts is because it was his first offseason with the 49ers. So he had been traded during the season, and now he got to go through a full offseason and go through every single part of it. Now he has an understanding of how the 49ers operate, what they do, and he doesn't really have to be there. There's plenty of veterans that can lead the way, from Elijah Mitchell, to Jordan Mason. Those guys know how to do it and can lead the young pups in the direction they need to go. And plus, Kyle Juszczyk is always there. So I don't think it's imperative for McCaffrey to be there. I don't know if it's tied to a contract situation. I do know Mike Florio said it wasn't tied to a contract situation, which he takes any opportunity to make things about a contract or whatever situation to talk about. So I don't know what it is. I do know McCaffrey and the 49ers have a lot of respect for each other. And if it is a contract thing, they are going to work on making sure they get McCaffrey what he needs. It could be guaranteed money, whatever, but I don't think it's a big deal yet. I won't be surprised if he doesn't show up to or if he shows up to mini camp. I think he will. And then we'll get to training camp. But you're right. I don't know how much it has to do with wedding. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it's simply that he's going to keep going through his workouts right now, and eventually he'll show up.
Are you concerned with any of the others that haven't shown up to OTAs? Because there's one beat writer, and I won't mention his name, but he tends to be very negative, who has said that this is an anti-Kyle thing, that there's a lot of players not showing up and it's a Shanahan issue. I don't buy that at all. But just curious what you think about are you concerned? Because, I mean, to me, we look at where Deebo Samuel hasn't shown up in the past. He's shown up this year, reportedly is in really good shape. Nick Bosa showed up. He never shows up. And sure, it sounds like Kyle asked him to be there, but any concern about players not showing up, or is this just a typical year, but people are making something out of nothing?
I think it's a typical year. I think, there's guys who don't show up to OTAs all the time. I mean, Trent Williams doesn't even have workout bonuses in his contract because he doesn't show up. So there's no need for it. So I just think this is normal veteran players. Plus, 49ers have been consistently playing deep into January and into February over the last several years. You need more time for recovery. Also, players just like going through their normal, natural routine because this part of OTAs is all about install. You know what? Most of these guys who have been with the 49ers for, 5 years, 3 years, whatever, they've went through install every single year. They're going to do it again at training camp. They're going to do it again at mini camp. They don't need to. So I think that most of them would like to just wait and then go to training camp or go to mini camp, and they don't really want to go through OTA. So I'm not concerned about veterans not showing up. I think there are guys that we have concerns about, Drake Jackson, Camelot, more so because they're hurt, and those are young players that we need to take another step. If those guys are the kind of guys I'm worried about, I'm not worried about Trent Williams or Christian McCaffrey or Tarvarius Ward, who's also dealing with an injury. I think most of them are injury related, but in the same regard, they don't have to be there. They already know what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and as we've mentioned before, Drake Jackson is trying to hold off Robert Bill Jr. Drake Jackson so far has been underwhelming. He had 3 sacks in the opener last year against Pittsburgh, and then disappeared after that. Camelot never played. You mentioned that, and he's falling behind, lower and lower in the depth chart. So I agree with you. Those guys need to be there. I'm going to throw you a little curveball because Tracy Sandler posted Chris Forrester, the 49ers offensive line coach, is met with the media not too long ago today. Here's what he said: invest in guys that touch the ball. We can find offensive linemen in the 5th or 6th rounds. I think we can develop those players. That was posted by Tracy Sandler. What do you think about that? Invest in guys that touch the ball. We can find offensive linemen in the 5th or 6th rounds.
That's confidence in your ability to develop players is what it is. So Chris Forrester believes that we don't have to have, top end talent at the position, that we can work these guys into our system. We just have to have specific traits. I like the confidence. And, I think that they've illustrated that that's the direction that they've continued to go. Lots of people want them to invest a high round draft picks. At some point they might. I mean, we've seen the Shanahans be willing to do that before, but yeah, I mean, this makes a lot of sense for Chris Forrester to say. I know that, when I coached offensive line, that was my mindset as well. Give me a player that has moldable abilities and I'll mold him into being a good football player. And so I think it's something that the 49ers feel they can do. They have a very keen eye for when it comes to a certain type of player that they want, and they continue to draft those players and develop them. I'm not sure that the fan base thinks the 49ers offensive line is as good as Chris Forrester or Kyle Shanahan believe the offensive line is. But I think they do believe that they can do this. So it doesn't surprise me he said that. They have the same sort of mindset a lot of times when it comes to the linebacker position.
Yeah, and that certainly is keeping with the company line, where they are investing in the guys who touch the ball, not so much in the guys who block. The concern that I have is that when they get to the big games in the postseason, be it the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, be it the NFC Championship against the Rams or the Eagles or the Lions, they've had problems blocking really good defensive lines. And so that would be my concern is, can you win a Super Bowl with guys that like Spencer Burford, who may not really be a starter. Now, granted, they almost have won a couple of Super Bowls with that mindset, but that's my concern. Can they finally get it done with an offensive line that's kind of patched together?
Yeah, it's always a big question. I mean, I think I've seen that preliminary reports are they're going to be ranked in the top 15 as far as offensive lines. And yeah, there's a lot of guys there that are pretty much makeshift. But I think if you look around the league, there's a lot of guys who were late round draft picks that are kind of put in there and developed, and I think that there's a question, about that. Hey, Mr. Corey said name an offensive lineman who in the 5th or 6th rounds that they've developed. I think they would argue that Colton McKivitz is a player that they developed and is a starting offensive tackle now from the 5th round. They believe that they developed Spencer Burford. And I know we have a bad taste in our mouth from Spencer Burford's play in the Super Bowl last season. But let's not forget that his rookie year, he played really well. Most people were so highly optimistic that they believed he had a Pro Bowl season coming in year 2. So they have gotten 4th and 5th round picks that they've been able to develop. I just don't think people are as high on them as guys like Chris Furster or Kyle Shanahan and guys in the building are. But I do want to err on the side of caution when it comes to a player like Burford, for instance, because we've seen him have a good year and a bad year. Let's let year 3 determine who Spencer Burford is before we decide that he's not going to be a good player. I think it's completely okay to have worries about him. There has been some red flags. He wasn't able to play up to the level that people expect, but he's still a young guy. I mean, he's really young, and his development can still happen. So I'm hoping that we get some positive play from Burford, but I'm very excited about Dominic Pooney. I see a lot of people talking about Dominic Pooney, and he was a guy I was a huge fan of. He will be a starter in year 2, no doubt. I just don't know where he's going to start.
Let's see. We have this question in the chat. Why is Ricky talking about Ricky Pearsall in a blue non-contact jersey? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I haven't heard anything. Have you heard? I would assume that he's dealing with some kind of injury, but I haven't heard.
I haven't heard either. To me, I mean, there's not a lot of contact when it comes to OTAs anyways, so it's probably just precautionary, but yeah, I haven't heard anything about it. Maybe somebody else will get news about it, but right now, Kyle Shanahan doesn't have to talk about any injuries when it comes to the offseason. So the information is few and far between when it comes to things that happen as far as injuries during OTAs or the offseason.
Yeah, and I saw that video earlier, but was hoping to hear something, but haven't heard anything. Wanted to get to the comment by Packers kick returner. What did I say his name was? Nixon. Dang it, I already forgot his first name. We talked about this before we went live, and I forgot his name already.
Keyshawn. Oh, is it Keyshawn?
Yeah, Keyshawn. Is he the one who fumbled and then the ball just happened to take a positive bounce for Green Bay? I think that's the guy. He had a big kick return and then fumbled, and that didn't go the 49ers way. But he said, and seemed like he must be talking about the 49ers, because he said, I think the situation was one of the Packers reporters asked why, because it sounds like all of their players were OTAs, or almost all of them were. And so a reporter asked him, why are you guys so ready? Like everybody's here, and so he said, I feel like we let a team off the hook last year. And this comes after hearing lots of Packers fans talking about how kind of the same thing. We let the 49ers off the hook. We should have won that game. We dominated them. I've heard that from Packers fans. So what did you think about that statement and the statement from Packers fans where they seem to be really high on themselves? Yeah, they had a good season. They're a good team. They're up and coming. They may be really good this year, but they haven't done much yet. And so it just seems like they're getting a little ahead of themselves.
Yeah, it's a little bit of loser talk. I mean, that's what happens. You gotta take accountability for what happened in that football game. And unfortunately, they didn't let the 49ers off the hook. Uh, the 49ers took care of business and won that football game. They made plays when they needed to make it. They flushed Jordan Love out of the pocket. Dre Greenlaw intercepted that pass. In fact, he had 2 interceptions in that game. Both teams were overcoming elements, but it's not about letting someone off the hook. It's about winning a football game. You have to be able to finish. And there's times of the 49ers finished football games, and 2 of those playoff games, Green Bay and Detroit, they finished, and those other teams didn't. You got to play 60 minutes, and you got to win 60 minutes of the time. Do I like the Green Bay Packers getting a little bit of an attitude and thinking that they got that ability? Sure, I do. I hope Green Bay and Detroit, they bring it all season because they're going to need it. Because the 49ers are the big bad wolf, and everyone wants to believe that they can actually beat the big bad wolf in the NFC, but no one has been able to really do it. In fact, we don't even know if in 2022 they would have gotten beat because we got Brock Purdy hurt. But we took our lumps and we came back and we got it done. So Green Bay, you want to get it done? Go out there and beat the 49ers in the playoffs next year. Not in the regular season. I know you're going to be hyped for that game to win in the regular season. No, you got to do it in the playoffs. But I like it. I like conversation like this. I like Demo clapping back against, I guess, his former high school teammate, which is kind of funny. So it's a lot of fun. I like when rivalries start because then, hey, that's when you get some more intense rivalries, and the 49ers have got a bunch. And isn't it funny that the 49ers are the ones that have the Eagles mad at them, and the Cowboys are always talking about them, and now it's Green Bay and it's Detroit, because there's one commonality. The 49ers are the team to beat in the NFC, and they all know, and they're all a little salty about it.
Yeah, Mr. Corey said, why wouldn't Packers fans feel that way? Isn't that how we feel about the Super Bowl? Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I also think that the 49ers have done more than the Packers have done. And so, yeah, but yeah, I agree with you. I agree with what Mr. Corey said, and it makes things more fun. But still, it's kind of interesting how players, making comments like that, and you talked about Diamador Lenore making, kind of spouting back. So. Well, the 49ers schedule is out. We didn't have a show last week, so we really didn't have a chance to talk. I think the schedule came out after we had been on, I think 2 weeks ago. So now that it's out, what games stick out to you as the most important, maybe the most important 2 or 3?
I think that the NFC West games, especially Seattle and Rams, are always the most important because you win your division, you're going to make the playoffs. So I think those are critical. And I think you got a couple tough ones. You head to Seattle on Thursday Night Football. If you can win that, that'll go a long ways to you continuing your NFC West domination. But also the Rams later in the season coming to San Francisco after the 49ers have had some tough games could be a tough one. And then I think the Green Bay game that I just alluded to a little bit before Thanksgiving is another one I look at. I don't worry about the Bills as much because that's a non-conference game, but that Green Bay game could go a long ways in determining not only who wins home field advantage for the playoffs and that number 1 seed, but also who wins the NFC North. And just where games are going to be played is going to be so significant because Detroit and Green Bay, if one of them win the number 1 overall seed, I think most teams would rather head to Detroit to play indoors than play in the frozen tundra of Green Bay. So that game is going to be very significant for the 49ers. And I think just listening to the conversations from players, the 49ers have an edge on Green Bay. They have an edge on Detroit right now because they've beat them. You don't want to give them any thought that they can actually beat you. To go ahead and beat Green Bay and to beat Detroit again would keep the thumb on them and just let them know, hey, you're not quite there yet. You've got a long way to go. And then one outlier I would say is that Dallas Cowboys game on Sunday Night Football. You play Kansas City the week before, and then Dallas is coming off a bye. If ever there was an opportunity for Dallas to get you, it would be this. I still don't think it's going to happen, but it's at least a game that's intriguing and could be very important to the 49ers playoff potential. So those are some games. I keep it to the conference division first, win the division, then win the conference, and you'll have a really good shot. But the AFC teams, I'm not as worried about.
I think that Detroit game could be a big one late in the season against maybe the team that's second best in the NFC. So that could be a really good one. And that Green Bay, Detroit, both those teams, NFC North, battling for position there. That's going to be a fun race to watch. Which games stick out to you as the most difficult?
I think the most difficult games are going to be, the Green Bay Bills. That time period is going to be tough. The weekend of the Green Bay game is the weekend before Thanksgiving. And so you're going to play Green Bay in Green Bay. Then you're going to travel home. You're going to practice. You're going to enjoy your Thanksgiving Thursday. I'm sure you're going to get you're going to travel on Friday. Then you got to go back to Buffalo and play on Sunday night. And I think that those two games are going to be very hard for the 49ers to win both. And just the travel, all the family distractions, everything that's going along there. I think that that's probably the toughest span for the season, unless it's Kansas City, Dallas. Those are kicked off by Seattle every time. So Seattle Thursday, those kind of groups of games I think are the most difficult. But I would say Green Bay Bills would probably be the toughest stretch for the 49ers.
Yeah, hard to think that that's not going to be the two toughest spots. Just saw that George Kittle met with the media and said that he should be good to go for training camp. He had core surgery, and so he said that he's on schedule. So that's great news. Last question: whose job? And you can go with a coach, you can go with a player, you can name one of each. Whose job is in jeopardy in 2024?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think there's a coach whose job is in jeopardy right now. You're going to have a new defensive coordinator, and so you like to give them time usually. So I don't think there'll be a coach. I think it would have to be a player, and I think there's a couple of players whose jobs could be up. And I saw that we had a question from Mr. Corey about the offensive line. And I think that could be a spot where a job could be up for grabs. And it might be along that offensive line. It might be with Jake Brendel. But I think you got a guy like Dominic Pooney who's coming. And so this is an opportunity for the 49ers to get better at the position. And he could potentially take over not just a guard spot, but maybe potentially Spencer Burford's spot. So Burford could be on notice, that, hey, you might not be on this roster. So I think it's going to be players that are more on the bubble. Deebo Samuel potentially is another guy. So as far as this question goes right here with what Mr. Corey said, would I like to see Feliciano at center? I think if Feliciano has the understanding of the offense and can get to the second level blocks that Jake Brendel can get to, yes, because I think he's better when it comes to anchoring. He's better when it comes to holding blocks. But we don't know where Dominic Pooney is right now in his development. He's got a long ways to go to be able to handle playing right guard in his rookie season. Spencer Burford was able to do it. If Dominic Pooney could show that he was able to do it as well, I think that could be a legitimate offensive line upgrade for the 49ers. Then you would have three interior offensive linemen with Banks, Feliciano, and Dominic Pooney who could anchor and not allow any pressure into the face of Brock Purdy, which could make it a lot easier for him to throw the football, step into passes, and get the ball downfield. So I think offensive linemen are kind of on the bubble a little bit. There's a lot of competition there, but I don't think a coach is. I know a lot of people want Kyle Shanahan to be on the bubble. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Why you would want that? If there is a coach on the bubble, let me throw this. We just saw a coach who came in as a defensive coordinator, lasted a year because the defense took a little step back. If that happens again, it's possible that Nick Sorensen could be one and done, especially when they hired an assistant head coach / defense. And so I don't know. I kind of lean toward you that that's not going to happen, but it happened again, or it happened last year. So who knows? And Josh said it's set up for Sorensen to be fired and Staley to take over next season. I don't disagree with it. I think that is a possibility if the defense isn't noticeably better?
I think if the defense isn't noticeably better, that's actually also a bad look for Staley. He was brought in to oversee the defense. So that would be a direct reflection of his ability to make sure Sorensen is right and able to handle the position. I think they're working in concert. And so I think it would be a bad reflection on both of those guys. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think the group, those two together, they have the right ability. They have the right mentality to be able to pull together and work together to get it done. So I know a lot of people are saying that, and maybe it would happen. I'm hoping it doesn't, because I want this defense to play really, really well this year, because that means the 49ers have a good chance to win the Super Bowl. But I think if you were going to find a position, that's probably it. He's comfortable with all of his position coaches. So that would probably be the weak link, because we haven't seen Sorensen do it. And Staley is there, and we've seen Staley do it in the past.
Yeah, I hope that Sorensen is a star that we didn't expect, and that here in a couple of years, there are teams coming after him to be their next head coach. Saw a question here from Josh. I'm going to give you one more. I know I've kept you a long time. So does Kittle sign an extension or leave?
I think he's going to end up signing an extension. They'll figure this thing out. I just wonder when it's going to be that George Kittle takes a little bit less money. We've seen the body starting to break down. He's still producing at a high level. He still blocks really well. He still can catch the football. But I think we've seen him fall off just a tiny bit. And so I don't know exactly what he's going to look like and when he's going to decide to take less money to potentially keep giving this team an opportunity to win the Super Bowl. So I think that they would like to work out an extension. And to be honest with you, right now, if you look at that tight end room, they have nothing after him right now that is a proven commodity. So they would have to definitely change that tight end room completely if they moved on from George Kittle. So I don't think that's what they want to do. I think they'd like to work out something, but both teams are going to have to work together to make it happen.
Bebop said, in Parag we trust. So there you go. Mr. Corey said, Kittle's the only tight end Shanahan and Lynch have ever acquired. Well, he's not the only one, but he's the only good one, for sure. And Luke said, Brendel was a Pro Bowl alternate. He's come out of nowhere, guy who played well the following year. Not as good, but showed up. So going to be an interesting training camp once we hit it in late July. Hey, that's all we have for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Next week, we'll be back to talk some 49ers mini camp. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to have the great Matt Mayoko joining us. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody, for taking time to hang out with us and listen, and especially those that have jumped in the chat. Thank you for taking part in this. Ant, any final words before we take off?
No, nothing. Just ready for mini camp to happen. It's going to be a lot of fun, and join us next week. It's going to be great. Like and subscribe to the channels, and give Marc a boost. We need to keep getting Marc's numbers up there. So everyone, if you haven't liked or subscribed to Marc's channel, do it. Get it done.
I appreciate that. Hey, everybody, have a good rest of your week. We'll see you next Wednesday at the same time. See ya.